go grab the Rogue class frigate, and then that's going to take you over to the Kickstarter campaign automatically, and then you can make sure to get notified on launch. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and start supporting this bad boy. And the way that I support these ships, it seems to work out 99% of the time first try. And that's the whole point of this video, is to show you how you can support models and have them be an incredible print the first time around, instead of having to take all that extra time and the extra resin wasted from having a failed print. We want to make sure that we're supporting the most important spots. We want to make sure that we are basically doing it in a way that you're just going to have a much higher success rate, right? Now with starships like this, I tend to try to either do 45-degree angles, or for the really long ships, if you have a lot of like long pieces or something like that, like you generally want to keep it pretty well elongated upwards, but I don't like to go full on that, because the problem with that is that you're going to start getting layer lines just directly across the whole thing, as well as that if there's any kind of shaking or movement or anything, then it's not going to have as much supports on the bottom to hold it in place. Like, think about this kind of like it's upside down. If I go to the export tab and I go to simulator, then we can see what actually it's going to look like as it goes up. And you can kind of simulate and see like, well, how is this going to be with this model? Now, if there's any shaking, like I have a few 3D printers. I have an FDM printer that sits close to this printer, and that could cause a little bit of shaking. And if this isn't, I have a baby too, and he likes to look at things, he likes to grab things, move things. If there's any kind of shaking, then it could actually break off of the supports. We don't have any supports yet, but it's going to be lifted up off of this, and it's going to have supports, you know. And so if it breaks off of those supports, then you're going to get more layer lines, and it could really deform the model. So what I find is to do a little bit of a happy medium. It's more like 50, I go like 45 to maybe 55, maybe even 60 degrees, but I'm going to stick right here, and this is at 60 right here, and I think that'll work great. Okay, and then I like to put it at 5 millimeters up. And then we go to the prepare tab, and we can start supporting this video into or I'll edit this video down into like a shorter actual clipped version. When it comes to starships, it's usually symmetrical. At least the bottom is usually symmetrical on most starships, so I tend to use this whole mirroring feature. And just keep the visibility normal, and then I like to start with medium supports, unless it's an exceptionally large model. And how big is this model? Cruisers, I stay on medium supports and light supports only. I don't ever need anything bigger than that. But if we go to the scale, we can see that it's 77 millimeters long. And even dreadnoughts, I use very, very minimal heavy supports, and you can actually see what my settings are for my light, medium, and heavy. So my light is 0.3, and then 2 and 1. Then I've got 0.4, 3, and 1.3 for diameter. And then on my heavy, it's 1, 4, and 3, and sometimes I'll just kind of like modify those as I go on the heavy ones. Because you don't necessarily need them to be extremely dense and heavy in order for it to work and to get a good print. But I like to start from the bottom. We started from the bottom, now we're here, which is still at the bottom, and focus on those parts that are basically going to support the rest of the model as it builds up. Like those first islands at the bottom that are especially large surface area, large enough surface area to put a medium support. There we go. That's looking pretty good already. So that's actually going to be pretty stable there at the bottom. Another thing that I like to do actually is turn these 3 off, except for bracing and raft, so that I can at least start to see a raft. Oh. And I usually do that before I even put any supports. Okay. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So then what I like to do is go up the middle and add a few medium supports. I know that there's going to be a rod hole here on another version of this, and it's going to be the exact same ship, same model, and I don't have to do the supports again. I'm just going to replace the model, and then it's going to have the rod hole there, which is really nice. Okay, so we're just going up the middle and adding some medium supports. I don't want to overdo the medium supports. It doesn't have to be incredibly dense in terms of the medium supports. But I just want to make sure that the model is going to stay very well in place. But I don't want to make it a nightmare to remove supports either at the same time. Okay, so that I think is going to be very stable. That's going to hold this in place, except maybe I'll actually put one or two over, like, out on the edge here, because that extends out pretty far. You can see that. Now, to be honest, as it is right now, it would print probably decently. We might need a little bit more down here to really hold this in place, because this is where it's printing first. It's printing from the bottom up, and it's going to print all of this. Then there's going to be all this overhang here, and so this is probably not going to be enough to hold that up. So if we added some more, we'll probably get a pretty good print. But what I like to do is to make sure that I'm adding some light supports to really support the details and make sure that the details are taken care of and that they're going to show up. Like this, for example, this is just going to print in the air. So one thing that we can do in order to do that effectively is going to actually be using the island detector. So we go to island, and then we might just start with normal. We're going to do a normal search, and what that does is it's just going to search for like the most prominent islands. If you do a detailed search, it'll actually take a lot longer to search, but it's going to do a lot better at finding every single island that it possibly can. And the islands are just places where it would try to print in the air, which it obviously can't just print in the air. It has to have support underneath it. So that resin that cures would actually just get stuck to the FEP at the bottom of the resin vat, and that can be a problem, so we don't want that. So we'll just add a nice little support here. We've switched over to light. We'll put one here, and this is going to hold up this wing as it prints. And I'm just going to add some extra support just to make sure that this wing is held up as it prints until it gets connected to the body. I'm going to add some more light supports here. And the thing with light supports is that they're not going to have as big of a divot when you pull them off. Okay, and now we've got a lot of support here. I want to support some of these panels, but we've got some supports in the way. So this is where I like to switch my visibility to either tips and bases, or sometimes I'll even just go contact. And in this case, I think I actually will do contact. And I'm just going to try to pick the edges of some of these panels where I want to make sure that they're going to be supported and not just try to print in the air. There we go. That's looking pretty good so far. See, this one's not supported, so I'm going to add something right there, right there. And then are there any areas, I like to use the contact visibility to look if there are any large areas that just don't have support at all, because then that could potentially lead to some layer lines or some separation. So I am just going to add an extra support right here, maybe one right here. And this is honestly looking pretty good. Oh, this is an island up here, so we're going to add a couple right there. Perfect. Perfect. Now, because we're at 60 degrees, I don't really want to touch these guns. They're pretty thin, and they're printing at more than a 45-degree angle up, so they should be able to print fine. If you have a significant amount of space, like if I only supported down here, then theoretically it could maybe print the rest of this even without any supports past that point, even if I only supported it like 50% of the way up. it could maybe work, but the further out it gets, the more weight is kind of coming down on this side without any support. But with just these little guns like this, I don't necessarily need to support them. And honestly, if I do support them, sometimes what I've found is that they break off with the supports if it's an especially thin piece. So you just want to be careful about that. And looking at these now next to the support, they're not too small and thin. So what I might do is just add a small support and just connect it right here. And if you just hold Alt, then you can connect it to another part. And then I will select both of those. And then I'm actually going to change the diameter to 0.7. And what that does is it makes extra sure that this support is going to break before this does. Because if we have it very thick diameter and an extra large tip diameter, then it's that much more likely that when you break off that support, it's going to actually break this with it. This is going to come off with it. So we don't want that. And then these are actually tipped up a little bit, even further than the 60 degrees. So I think these are going to print just fine. But just in case, you could always just add a little mini support. Yeah, I feel like that's worth it up here. Let's just double check that looks good on the other side. Yeah, and that should be fine. If you add it way too far down here, and it's just this teeny tiny little area, sometimes you can't get to the mini support to break it out. Like even with the knife, like even if you take a knife, if it's too close, you can't even get to it with a knife. And so then you've just got this little extra support there that it just actually kind of looks worse. So I like to try to make sure that it's at least a big enough area. And then here we might do a nice little mini support there. And then just make sure that that's not overlapping anything. And this is just going to hold it in place while it prints upwards. Make sure it's a little bit more straight towards the bottom. And do the same here. You guys, this is pretty much done. Like this is going to be a very nice looking print. Very nice looking model. Not to brag or anything, you know, but I put a lot of time and work into these. And actually, one last thing that I will do is make sure that we have the bottom here supported well enough by adding some light supports to the engines back here. And I'll put one here as well. And then I want to make extra sure that these divots aren't going to show up. I think it's necessary to have these medium supports here just to make sure that this is all well supported. And what you might consider if you're printing a Starship fleet, since you're going to be seeing the back of the fleet more than you're going to be seeing the front of the fleet if it's your fleet, you might consider supporting it from the front. But I think it's better that my opponent thinks my fleet is especially menacing, so I want the front to look good. So, but when it comes to the light supports, I'm just going to dial this down just a little bit, 0.28. And then I'm going to add some little supports here. And then I'm even going to change the diameter on this too. Whoops. Control Z. And I make sure to do Control Z instead of deleting, because when you're mirroring and then you hit delete, it only deletes the one side. So I always make sure to use Control Z now. That has actually caused me problems in the past. Let's do this. This is just going to make sure that we've got a nice solid base down at home to make sure that this thing is well supported and stable as it prints upward. Then if you just click any support, it's going to actually change your settings to the same as that support, which I find actually to be very nice. And you're going to notice that I go maybe a little bit overboard compared to you, but what I prefer is to use a little bit extra support rather than trying to get away with a few less supports and then ending up with a model that I'm not happy with, because then if I have to go back and print it, or I have a failure and I have to go back and print it, I've wasted way more resin than I did with those few extra supports. So I have found that it is pretty much always worth it to just go for the extra supports. Just support, if when in doubt, add a nice little support there, right? That's basically my philosophy. So now what I like to do at this point is to optimize the model. I find that if you do actually do the bracings, especially on larger models, it goes way overboard. It's way too much bracing. And then it's actually really hard to remove, because even if you hit Control Z, it doesn't necessarily remove it. I don't know if they've patched that, but I don't want to go back and do this one again. And we're just going to go ahead and hit Optimize. What's cool too is that you can select certain supports if we can. Yeah. So you could select certain supports and then just brace or optimize those. Maybe we'll try that right now. We'll just select these front supports because this is going to probably need some bracing as it prints. A lot of these are not going to need to because they're kind of bracing themselves anyway because of the optimization. But these might have a little bit of trouble printing that far up straight without having any kind of wobble or anything. They could actually even break on the way up. And so if you just select them, and then you go over here and you hit brace and optimize, then it's going to brace those. Look at that. I think that's pretty awesome. And it even is helping with this. I think that's pretty good right there, except that I think these two could use some bracing together. Do we have anything over here? We could brace these. That should be fine. And maybe one more here just in case. I'll check the other side. And voila, we've got a pretty nice, well-supported ship. I'm gonna go ahead and, oh, it decided to actually do that. Okay, here's something that you can do. Here's a tip. Hold Alt and then double click. Oh, let's get rid of our mirroring. A tip here is if you hold Alt and then you double click, it'll just create basically an extra support off of a support. So it's just like extra bracing. So we can do something like that. And then you can also hold Alt and just click in order to create supports between supports, or bracing between supports. So I'm just gonna honestly probably just do something like that and call it a day. Just making sure that that is going. I really hate the way that that looks. That looks so ridiculous. So I'm just gonna hit a medium on this, and then I'm gonna brace it, and that's gonna actually print phenomenally well. Now, what I like to do is save that. Then I hit Control up E, and then I can actually save the STL version. So now I have a .lys, a .stl, and then I also have the unsupported STL. And then what's really cool is that if I hit Control Shift S, I can save it with the rod hole version. I think I usually do it like this. I can always rename it later. It's been a little bit. I went and worked a different job and been taking care of my baby and started a new company. It's been crazy. It's been crazy. Okay. But we're almost done here. And now that I saved the new version, we're in the new version with the rod hole, but it doesn't have a rod hole yet. So then I can actually just replace the file with the version that has a rod hole. Cruiser 1, rod hole. Rod hole broken. Yeah, this should be the newest version. That is the newest version. Perfect. Make sure that it's repaired. And then we've got a support there that we just need to move or remove. And I will put it down here towards the bottom. And then you can even right click and just recalculate so that it'll go straight. Look at that. Isn't that, man, forgot how fun this is, man. It's pretty cool. And then we've got a beautiful looking ship here. So thanks so much for watching. That's it for right now. I'm going to go ahead and do all the extra work that it takes to get one of these ships ready, which is actually a lot because, I mean, it's a lot to design and then even make sure that it's repaired and everything. But now I have to go and make all of the custom bases and everything and do all the print tests. So I've got a lot of work to do before the Kickstarter campaign launches. But make sure to just check out the description, grab that free ship, the Rogue Class Frigate. It's only available at the link in the description through our website. And check out the Kickstarter too. If you go grab the ship, it'll take you to the Kickstarter, or just go straight to the Kickstarter link also in the description and get notified on launch. Because there's actually going to be an awesome special day one reward that I might be doing a live stream tomorrow to design. I think that would be kind of fun if we actually design it on a live stream. I'll see if I have time for that. But until next time, you guys, thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one. Until